pomegranate shoulder of lamb. No one's going to notice if I just steal this little piece under here, are they? This is my Rosh Hashanah staple. This marinade not only works on lamb, works on chicken, works on salmon. It is all the flavors of the festival with honey and pomegranate molasses and warm spices. Tons of onions. Throw it all together in a pan, throw it in an oven for 6 hours, take it out, serve it. It's absolutely delicious. It is regal in its festivity, and it's not only for Rosh Hashanah, it's for any time you're feeding a crowd. You can thank me later, but this truly is your entertaining dish gift. We're going to throw together a little marinade. Everything's going to hang out on this shoulder of lamb for a minimum of an hour and up to 24. Roast it low and slow for about 6 hours. I sometimes do it overnight. Clearly I don't sleep enough. And that's it. In the meantime, here's how you make it. 3 onions. These are medium yellow onions that I have just very thinly sliced and placed in the bottom of the dish, around but basically underneath the lamb. And it looks like a lot of onions, but it's going to cook down to this kind of jammy consistency. Onto the marinade. I've got some really delicious cardamom pods here. I'm going to use about maybe 5 or 6 because this is a nice 2.5 kilo shoulder of lamb here. We're going to make the entire marinade in here, by the way. Bash them to get their skins off, release the seeds. Just going to give them a quick bash. The difference between ground cardamom and crushing the seeds like this is huge. I could leave them in the bowl, but I'm just going to tip them into here for a minute because we're going to crush the garlic in here. I'm going to use about half a head of garlic. Just going to bash the skins off, pop them in the mortar and pestle. You can skip this stage completely and just halve your garlic head and chuck it in with the onions at the bottom if you're really in a rush. I'm going to add a very good pinch of Maldon salt. A couple of good pinches, enough almost to fully season this big shoulder of lamb. And I'm going to crush the garlic in here with the salt. The salt helps break down the garlic. Now for the fun stuff, we're going to chuck these cardamom pods back in. It's about a teaspoon of cardamom. Good amount of cinnamon in here. You know, this is essentially starting its life as a Rosh Hashanah recipe. I'm going to put a teaspoon of allspice, a tablespoon of fennel seeds. I love them in here with the lamb. Aleppo pepper, a teaspoon. You need a bit of a hit of a spice to counter the sweetness here. And then we're going to get on with the saucy bit. So I've got some pomegranate molasses here. It's amazing with lamb. And some honey. I'm going to give these a stir before I add the lemon juice and the olive oil. You can see all that cinnamon in there. It's absolutely delicious. Let me get some lemon juice. I'm going to grab some olive oil and I'm going to just drizzle the onions and the lamb. And remember, the lamb is quite fatty, so you don't need to add much fat to this at all. And a little bit of extra salt, especially on the onions. Now for the fun bits, to get your hands dirty. I am going to rub this into my lamb. You've got to take your lamb out of the fridge at least an hour before you put it in the oven so it comes to room temperature. So if you're really short on time here, and I'm making a mess for a change, then you could just marinate it for that hour. While I'm marinating it here and I'm rubbing it all in, I'm actually going to tuck the onions underneath here. Just going to let this hang out together for a bit now. And then we will put it in the oven, we will cover it, and we will let it do its thing. So this has had a little time to hang out in its marinade. What we want to do is add a little bit of liquid to this. This is a very pungent marinade, so we don't need to add wine or stock. It's already got quite a lot of salt, it's got a lot of flavour. How much water you add will depend on how snugly your lamb is sitting in your dish, because what you really want is for it to come about a third of the way up the side and not more. The lamb and the onions will release some liquid. I'm lucky enough to have this dish that goes oven to table. If you have a Dutch oven or Le Creuset with a tight fitting lid, even better. You don't have to cover it. That will depend on the size of your pan and the size of your lamb. It rhymes. But we are going to now, this has been hanging out. This is at room temperature. It's come out of the fridge before we put it in the oven. Putting this in a very hot 250 degree oven for about 15 minutes, just till it gets a bit of colour, the onions start to break down. Then we're going to take it out, we're going to cover it with parchment paper and foil very tightly, put it in a much lower 150 degree oven for about 6 hours. And the magic is going to happen. This has had its little golden moment. It's had 15 minutes in a very hot 250 degree oven. Now we're going to put it to bed. So I've got some parchment paper here that I'm going to wet and really tuck in this little baby. And that way it will not stick to the foil and it will steam under it. It creates a protective layer between the meat and the lid. Ran those 2 pieces under some cold water, wrung them out like a tea towel, And now let's just create this little blanket. You really want to tuck all the edges in. Now, we're going to cover it really well, and I will seal it in a minute. So I'm going to do this with my gloves. And I'm going to seal it round really, really, really well. And now I'm going to put it in the oven, 150 for 6 hours. I'm going to make a very quick gremolata to sprinkle on top. Now, gremolata is a very posh way of saying some parsley, some garlic, some lemon zest. I'm going to roughly chop these leaves. Get my lemon. I'm going to add just a little clove of confit garlic and some salt, which miraculously appeared just now. Nicely mix these up together. Include just a few pearls of pomegranate seeds. That's our gremolata, ready for our lamb. I'd love to tell you it's 6 hours later, but I actually made this yesterday. You know, time is of the essence. Here we have it. It smells incredible. All of the onions have turned to jam. There is this gorgeous gravy, which is going to be incredible. In actual fact, this tastes much better if you've made it a day before. You take it out of the oven after it's 6 hours, you let it cool completely, cover it, put it back in the fridge. Let it sit in the fridge overnight or until you're ready, and then when you want to rewarm it, take it out of the oven and you'll find all the fat that has cooked out of the lamb in the low and slow process will have solidified on top, which you can remove it, making this a much more palatable gravy without all the fat. So this is the fat-free version, could we say that? Probably not, I'll be sued. Let me know what you think about that. Now, if you're cooking something at 180, it can go in at 180. I wouldn't put it much above 200. If your oven is hot because you're rewarming another dish before you serve for your feast, just cover it with foil for the first 20 minutes and then remove it so it doesn't brown too much more. It is a brown dish. We have our gremolata. When you're ready to serve, just sprinkle on the gremolata and all of a sudden it becomes festive ready. Final sprinkling of salt, and that is a thing of beauty. Happy festivities, everyone.